Welcome to the October 3rd meeting of the Mobile City Planning Commission. I would like to take a moment to review our general operating procedures. Our meeting is divided into two sessions, the public hearing session and the deliberation session. In the public hearing session, an application or group application on the agenda is called. The applicant makes his or her presentation. Commission members ask questions, if any. Members of the public may make their comments. Only 4 people may speak for an agenda item or project and 4 against. Each speaker is limited to 5 minutes, subject to questions by the commission. After 4 minutes, a loud beep will indicate 1 minute left to speak, and at this point, please summarize your comments. After all opposition speakers have finished, the applicant will be given time to respond. If you do intend to speak, please come to the podium, speak into the microphone, and give your name and address for our minutes. Please direct all comments to the commission and not to the applicant or the audience. And please remember to speak directly into the microphone. On routine applications, the applicant may simply raise his or her hand. If there are no objections to the staff recommendations, I will then announce that the applicant is in full agreement with those recommendations. If there are any questions, the applicant will be given an opportunity to respond. After hearing all applications, the commission will go into deliberation session. In the deliberation session, the commissioners discuss each application with input from the staff as necessary, but with no input from the audience. The commissioners then vote on each application, and results of voting can be learned from the planning department. If some issue arises in the deliberation session that were not addressed in the public hearing, the chairman has the discretion either to allow additional comments pertaining to those issues in order to resolve them, or call for the application to be held over for discussion at a future meeting. Occasionally, one or more commission members may recuse themselves from discussing and voting on a given application. A recusal does not necessarily mean the member is directly involved with the application or the applicant. Depending upon the circumstances, ethical rules may require a recusal when there is only the slightest appearance of a conflict of interest. If a regular member recuses, a supernumerary will vote in their stead, unless both supernumeraries are already voting due to absences. The Planning Commission makes final decisions subject to appeal on subdivisions, plan approvals, plan unit developments, PUDs. The Planning Commission only makes recommendations on zoning applications, with the City Council making the final decision. Please silence your cell phones at this time. Commissioner and staff, please remember to turn on your microphones when speaking. Roll call: myself, Mr. Cart Blackwell, here. Mr. Matt Anderson, here. Mr. Nick Omberger, here. Mr. Bess Rich,
here.
Mr. Don Embry,
here.
Mr. J. Stubbs,
here.
We have a quorum. Our first items, item number 1, 5500 Plantation Road, Russell Investments, LLC. It's recommend tentative approval. Is the applicant present? Are you in agreement with staff recommendations? Applicant is present and in agreement.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I have placed at the commission members' locations the revised site plan. The conditions in the staff report are based on this revision. It simply was not included in your packet.
Anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Questions by commissioners? Thank you. Item number 2, 94 East Drive, Dawson Apartments. Recommended for tentative approval. Is the applicant present? Are you in agreement with staff recommendations? Yes. Item is, applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Yes.
My name is Scott Jones. I live at 5958 Shenandoah Road North, right at the intersection of East Drive and Shenandoah. And I say I'm against it, but in actuality, I don't have a problem with it with a caveat. And what I would like to do, if you'll look at page 10 of this document, we'll start with that.
Could you show us the page you're referring to? We don't
Page
have-
10?
We don't have page
Oh,
numbers.
it's
Yeah, we have
the...
a different book.
Yeah.
Okay, it's the Phloem locator map. Right there. This shows our neighborhood at Ridgefield, which lies in the yellow at the south of this map, is a low-density area. And the dividing line lies just across, I believe that's 3 mile there. On the opposite side of that, just adjacent to this site, there is a church, a school. There's another church right to the south property of this. And in addition, in just the 2 months that I've spoken here, this issue, and then there was another issue on East Road. This is a second development now in 2 months, 2 to 3 months, and there's more coming. And I think that is one of the things that I want us to address. If you look at page 3 of this, paragraph 2, I would like to review that, because I think this directs at the heart of the issue with us in Ridgefield. It says, PUD review examines the site with regards to its location to ensure that it is generally compatible with neighboring use, that adequate access is provided, no factor, without generating excess traffic along my residential streets. There's the issue. And I don't believe this commission has really looked at this issue. When I was here with the other development just south, the engineering department spoke up and said there's no issues with that development. If you look at this report, it's the same report. There's no issues with this development. But there's nothing in this document. There's nothing that alludes to looking at this from a holistic, total approach to all the developments on East Road. There's nothing that looks at the school and sees all of the traffic generated from that school. It's not even shown on this map. There's nothing that shows the traffic on East Road to South Alabama, which lies adjacent to the Mitchell Center. There's nothing that addresses the building of a stadium that is not going to be just for football games. It's going to be used for a lot of other different venues. And right now, East Road is a traffic wave for that traffic. My personal concern is that I've sat in numerous meetings here and see the same issue as I've just pointed out. Conclusion can easily be made that bringing in important businesses is extremely important to the city. We agree with that. But at what cost to the citizens? At what cost to the neighborhoods?
1 minute.
I'm asking that this committee, for once, take a look at what it appears to have been unwilling to do in the past, and that's think of the neighborhoods. Think of the citizens. I've seen 2 and 3 levels of questions asked back to developers, yet over and over again I see citizens here that bring up concerns and never once are asked any more questions. And never once are their concerns ever voiced in a discussion at this panel. What we're asking for is simple, and that is that you think about the safety of our neighborhood. Because I can't let my grandkids walk outside in the backyard because of the traffic on East Road. I run that road every morning that I'm in town. Yesterday, I could not cross that road, East Road, until I got to Old Shell Road because of the traffic on that road. Is that really low-density usage? It should not be a metropolitan throughway. We have built roads from University to Schillinger Road to handle the traffic to South Alabama. East Road was never designed to be that. So what I'm asking this planning commission, and it rests here. You have all these authorities that report to you. It rests here. What we're asking you to do is block off East Road at Ridgefield subdivision, at 3 Mile Creek, to protect our kids, to protect our grandkids, protect our pets. Because right now, I will tell you firsthand, it's not safe. And my daughter has almost been hit 3 times as I've watched her try and back out of our driveway. That shouldn't happen in a neighborhood. And that's not what that shows. So I'm asking you to protect what the plan was. And the investment that we've put into that neighborhood, protect that for us. That's what I'm asking from this committee. Thank you.
Todd LaCour, 600 Shenandoah Road. East Drive is mayhem. I don't know if any of y'all have been on it recently, but at the beginning of it, sometimes you feel like you're on a country road, and then you're next to an apartment complex, a new apartment complex going up. You've got places of worship, a school, older patio homes, and some residential. This project includes 3 stories, 36 units, obvious some parking spots. You could have 2, 3, 4 cars per unit. That's up to almost 100 cars for an apartment complex on East Drive, if they come and go at one time per day. Well, most people, they leave more than one time a day. A couple of years ago, there was a traffic study that we pushed the city to do for East Drive because of this concern and other projects. And the traffic study was done Tuesday morning to a Thursday night. It wasn't a full week. When was the last time that we actually did a full traffic study on East Drive to combat the growing, university as well as the developments that we're seeing here? We've got to figure out as a city how to protect the integrity of great neighborhoods that we have in this city so that people don't move away. Because as he mentioned before, it is a huge problem, and it's a huge problem for our neighborhood. The traffic's out of control. I grew up in Ridgefield, born and raised in the neighborhood, moved back 6 years ago, have 2 kids. Personally, I have almost been hit 3 times, twice by college students, another time by somebody else cutting through the neighborhood. And my daughter was almost hit on her bike. She was on a sidewalk from a student texting, and they ran up on the curb. I've witnessed in front of my house 2 students passing each other on Shenandoah Road West. We're all for the growth of the university. I mean, it's exciting. It's exciting for, the city of Mobile. But where it butts up, as the last map showed, to a residential subdivision is the issue. The issue is safety, preserve the integrity of our neighborhoods, protecting our children, protecting our pets. So I just ask that y'all look at this and look at the developments. There has been, 2 or 3 that have come up over the past couple months. And, the issue, it's a big issue for us. It's a big issue for our community. And we just want to preserve our neighborhood that we have. Thank you.
Anyone else here to speak against? Any questions from commissioners?
Yes, I have some questions. I think the sentiment of the residents is clear. It's articulated, as mentioned a few other times when development in this area, on this corridor, is before this commission. I'm going to ask the applicant, what makes this a plan unit development?
I'm going to answer that because the zoning amendment in 1981 made the condition. This does not qualify for a PUD. There's no multiple buildings. There's no cross access. There's no reason this should be a PUD. It's zoned R3. It should really technically, under our zoning ordinance, be approved as is. It's just that in 1981, the council, when it rezoned it to R3,
Correct.
added the condition that was not apparently included by the Planning Commission that's attached a PUD requirement to it. But it's, under our ordinance, it doesn't qualify or require a PUD, I'll put it that way.
Okay, the condition was placed as a PUD. Which, when you look at the meaning of what a PUD is, it's the buildings that make up the whole subdivision. And if you look at the other R3s in the area, they probably came on around the same time as this condition was attached in the early 80s. And they were all at the time owner-occupied, but very small lots. And you have Sussex Place and you have Yorktown. There is an apartment complex that's directly across, well not because you have the R1 that's across from you have the mosque, and then there's another apartment complex. And that is only 2 stories. There are no 3-story buildings that front or have access onto East Drive. They're all 2-story. And yes, you do have the zoning, but it would be remiss that we not go back historically to look at what that 1981 Planning Commission, now why it took this long, we could opine legally, obviously, that it doesn't require the PUD, but the PUD was there for a purpose, and that was to create an environment that looked like the rest of the area and wasn't a story, one building program. The density was worked on from the last 2 proposals or applications or whatever, and you're down to 36 bedrooms. Correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And you have 50 parking spaces.
That is correct.
Which exceeds the need, because what is it, 41 would be correct? But you can't say it's just strictly student housing, but let's be obvious about it. It's next to the University of South Alabama. It's always been next to, even in 1981, the university was up and running. I think that Planning Commission understood the closeness to South Alabama. But a PUD is to be unique. It's supposed to have characteristics that, as was already stated, is a blend to the area. Having an apartment 3-story complex with 50 parking spaces is not in keeping with that corridor. And I just, life of me, if a former Planning Commission had a requirement, they meant it to be planned unit development. So I can't argue legally. I don't.
I'm not sure I understand where you're going with that. They would require a PUD.
Yes,
they wanted to see multiple buildings?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I didn't know what you were trying to
Yes, exactly, because that is exactly what those other R3s are that came up at the same exact time. And to see, and they're like, and those are 2-story buildings, and they were owner occupied at the time. I don't know if that's the case today, nor does this Planning Commission get into ownership. But they get into the idea that it's has a unique characteristic, will not give a negative effect to surrounding properties. And we have heard in no uncertain terms that this does give a negative effect to have additional traffic that will egress and ingress because of the corridor's program, and traffic lights that have been placed at Airport and Ridgefield Road and Airport, and Old Shell and the Mitchell Center. Until that traffic light was placed there, it was not much of a cut through, but that has transpired over the last 30, 40 years. And I think that the requests that we're getting, and I would think even somebody who is doing a development, and I don't know, you're the engineer, correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, so we've never really addressed the owner, but you would think you would want anyone would want a successful program,
Sure.
for people that they're going to be moving into place. Again, PUDs, they have conditions. they're there for the right reasons. It's supposed to be open space. How much open space have you programmed into this facility?
Square footage wise, I think it's around 7,000 square feet of open space in landscaping, is in meeting with the zoning and all the requirements of
Okay.
that.
And let's see, let me ask some other questions, because I made some highlights. Okay. It's one big building, right?
That is correct.
Okay. Do you have any kind of amenity within that building that makes it unique?
Amenities, there's a laundry facility and there's bike parking facilities to promote multimodal transportation. We're continuing the sidewalk across the right-of-way to, again, promote multimodal. So those would be the amenities included.
Okay, and then there's supposed to be yards, or do any of the units have yards of any kind?
There's some space off the back of them that's intended to be green space that open up onto a porch.
Okay, I'll ask the staff this. The ratio of publics, you can't take in the parking lot, you can't take in the street to get into the unit, which I imagine is not going to be, it's going to be a private drive to get in and out of the park. Yeah, there is no drive, exactly. So is the circulation taken into consideration for getting fire vehicles and for the cars to back out within that 50-lot subdivision? Is that all been approved?
I think you kind of lost both
Okay.
of us there.
Okay, I wanted to know about the circulation, because that's another thing that a PUD requires, proper circulation.
But you said a 50 lot. Are you
50 parking spaces.
50 parking spaces?
We don't get into parking spaces, but in preliminary look at it, it doesn't appear as it's designed right now, it does provide an adequate turnaround for fire apparatus.
Yeah,
So he's going to lose some parking spots and some green space to be able to provide that, I think. But we can work with him on that.
In other words, to get the radius for the truck to turn around?
That or a hammerhead or a modified hammerhead, there are 4 or 5 options that they can choose from to be able to do that.
Okay, and then, so if they don't have the 50 parking spaces, it would lower number of parking spaces for each of the bedrooms, but it couldn't go below the 41? Is that correct? They can't go below the 1 with the number of units? 40. Okay. So they could
I don't think it's the commission's position to design it for them. I mean, I think you just asked the question, but, because at this point, you're into the weeds of the design of the development, and I don't think that's our intent.
The intent is that it was supposed to be a PUD which has conditions and does not have a negative effect on surrounding areas. So, again, if you look at it, a PUD, it's supposed to have multiple buildings. We wouldn't get into owner-occupied, but at least we would get a profile that wasn't in keeping with the area, and therefore also limit the number of cars that would come in and out of the facility, which is a real concern. So,
Understood. The only comment I would like to make is full consideration will be given to fire access and turnarounds, just to promote safety of the occupants of the building. That's obviously paramount to what we're doing.
I would assume the building is sprinkled.
It will be. I'm sorry, Jay Broughton, Anchor Engineering, 50 North Florida Street.
all right. I mean,
Now, the resident, the person who spoke against mentioned blocking the street, who takes up that issue? See, the person who spoke against talked about blocking the entrance at Ridgefield, and I said, who would they take that up with?
That would be initiated, I believe, through the city clerk's office, and then there is a process
that's called a vacation.
that
Yeah.
it would have to go
Right.
through.
And there were ideas about security gates to access the traffic so that it would not stop police and fire and even sanitation, because the city would control its use. And it's done in other communities, especially, you could point to the University of Alabama up in Tuscaloosa. That city is using security gates around neighborhoods that's near the university. It's a really good plan. And it was discussed at length, and I'm hoping that's not an finished issue for our city to help neighborhoods take their quality of life serious.
But that would be independent of this project, because that's
The Planning
off-site.
Commission could make overtures that studies should be done. We've done it in the past.
But we can't put the weight of his project to provide a study and a
No,
block
I
foot on the
don't, I
street.
don't believe that this project, well, it might qualify, I would beg to differ, but I hear what you're saying, but this Planning Commission has the authority to request studies, to request information about how to secure, because we are in the business of doing the long-range planning for the citizens of Mobile. And one of them is to keep neighborhoods stable, viable, and valuable to this city.
I believe that's a new
We're
business.
hearing that this is a change in character that is devaluating, and devaluation of property should be taken very seriously by the
Blocking
city
the
of
street would
Mobile.
be a new business issue and not an issue that's to burden his application at this moment. That's a
Yep, that was
quick
the
discussion.
point that the gentleman who came down, who's right on the corner of East Drive and the larger subdivision, and he said, every time people come, it's, this one is okay, but when do you look at it cumulatively, and when do you make a decision that negative effects are bringing down an area that does not deserve to be impacted by a negative impact, because eventually that's a tipping point. So when do you decide the tipping point is here? And they have told numerous times that the tipping point is each time they come, because no one has paid attention to this change in traffic pattern. It has to do with the traffic pattern and the location of a traffic light. People like to have controlled access.
Mr. Chairman, if we can move on, the issue
Yes.
that the council brings up is a bigger picture issue that should be working with the administration and
that's
the
right.
neighborhoods. It's a much bigger issue. It's bigger than this one development. If we could please move on, I really appreciate that.
You can't from the audience, please.
Okay, yeah.
I think we're all, we all share the concern about traffic, and I mean,
Yeah.
every time we do have, every time.
Sir, please, only people from the podium, at the podium can talk. Please have some respect for our rules, okay?
Every time a project comes up in the air, this is what we address, and, I mean, we understand the concerns, but the question is, what can we do about it? I mean, we look at traffic patterns do change, but, I mean, may I ask Mary Beth, when was the last time that we did a traffic study in that area?
The last time we truly looked at East Drive, independent of anything else, was related to the mosque and the development going on. There's not been any other individual studies on East Drive.
When was that?
2 or 3 years ago, I want to say.
Probably 4, actually.
It has been a little while, yeah, when it was first brought up for their expansion in their new building.
Question for staff. Mr. Staff, are you aware of any other applications for development on East Drive?
We do not have any pending at this time, and to my knowledge, we have not had any pre-meetings, over possible applications.
Well, obviously, blocking off the road would be probably the only solution that we're going to find, because the traffic is already, bad in the area. There's no question about that. But the question is, who has the authority to initiate blocking off that going into Richfield?
It's a process initiated with the city clerk's office that would then be forwarded to the city council. Multiple departments weigh into that decision as far as providing information to council, planning staff, traffic engineering, city engineering, police, and fire, public works.
Is this something that would be appropriate for the city council person in that area to
We've tried.
push forward?
That's not something I can really answer.
I'll answer yes.
Yes, okay, all right.
Yes, and it's been tried. And
And I don't mean to drag this on, but I was going to say this sooner or later today. We spend more time on East Road, East Drive, than we do on any other part of the city. And I think all these people back here, every time they come down here, what I hear is that they want this road closed off. And I don't know if the council's talked about it. But we would all love for that road to be closed off, and then East Drive could be developed like it's zoned.
Absolutely.
well, thank you. I like hearing that. Thank you very much.
Really, the
Yes.
solution to everything on
Right.
this drive is closing that off.
There is no other solution.
We've done
Yeah.
that in other places of the city, I understand, in the last 5 years. And, yeah, I mean, you're right in front of me, I'm looking at you, I think that's what needs to be.
Yes, but a vacation is not viable. Because there's too many people now on East Drive that need services.
Like I said, a much bigger, longer conversation for a different day. If we can move on, please, it would be great.
Any other questions of the applicant that pertain to his project?
It does pertain.
Thank you.
Thank you.
New subdivision applications. Item number 3, 5504 Timberland Ridge Road, Middle Earth subdivision. Recommended for approval. Is the applicant present? Are you in agreement with staff recommendations? Applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. Okay, on item number 3, you come to the podium and give your name and address and ask your question.
My name is Carl Johnson. I own property adjacent to this property, and it's been attempted several times to build a subdivision there, and as I understand it, part of the problems has been the required drainage and access and roads and everything else that's been proposed to put into this property, and then it fell through because I don't really know exactly why, but I was told that the viability of the project versus the cost of what was required by the city to make it work. So I'm just an interesting person who has property adjacent to this property and want to know what's going to be done with it.
Have you seen the application package?
All I've seen is what was sent to me in the registered letter, nothing else, just a,
Yeah.
it doesn't lay out any, how many houses, what kind of houses,
No,
what
it's
kind
not
of
there.
townhomes, or
Well,
what?
the packet that we have says that the applicants are proposing to purchase the property with the intent of constructing a single-family residence for themselves and their children, so it sounds like it'll be.
Okay, well, like I said last time, and it says subdivision, and I called and asked, and it said subdivision. They said, when it says SUBD, that's, they're intending on putting a subdivision there. So if this is a single-family dwelling, that's a horse of a different color. It's just a subdivision. I'm highly interested in
I think
what's
it's just
happening.
It's a one-lot subdivision.
Yeah, it's confusing when you get your letter about using that word.
Yeah, so it's being
I'm sorry.
subdivided, it's being subdivided, but there's not a subdivision going in, if that makes any sense.
Well, I point blank asked that question when I called on the phone, and they said, yes, it is a subdivision.
Yeah, that's,
Well,
Like-
it's
and I
just
said-
one lot.
Legally, it is, but it's only one lot subdivision.
Okay, and I asked that question, is it 2 homes, 5 homes, whatever? Okay, so it's a single dwelling? Okay, and access and drainage, that's the things on my mind? So access is at the end of timber into the property?
Yeah, it looks like the Timberline Ridge, the access into it.
Okay.
And then as far as drainage goes, it really depends on what they submit in terms of their plans
There's
to
an
build.
adjacent church that's there, and I was just wondering whether they were buying access from the church in there, because they've got a giant tower that they put up that I don't know if they had any kind of hearing on or not, but
It would appear to us that the right-of-way access from Timberline Ridge that goes, to the property, so That's where their access.
And there's
likely
already
will be.
an issue with drainage and everything else that goes into a holding pond that's right button up to my property that the city is not maintaining.
It's a floodway.
As a matter of fact, it's eroding my property, and they have told me several times that they've got a contractor that's won a bid to come address that.
Okay.
Been
The
since
the
March.
vast majority of retention ponds are maintained by the homeowners associations of the
No, this is
subdivisions?
not that. It is drainage. The culvert has sunk in. It is eroding my property.
Well, if you could call that into the 311 system,
have.
somebody from the engineering department will.
I went through the whole thing. They actually said that they were awarding the bid to fix that. That's been since March.
Okay.
The contractor is MIA.
It's possible that it's, a lot of the drainage projects that we let are projects that have 10, 15 sites. If you can give that gentleman right there in the plaid shirt your name and number, we'll find out and let you know exactly where that contractor is. Well, we'll let you know, because if somebody's told you that it's under contract, it all likelihood is. I just need to find out where the contractor is and let you know what his intended date going to be your site is.
I'm just addressing my concerns about additional
yeah.
things.
Yeah.
Hey, look, I appreciate everything each one of you do. I know Ms. Rich personally, and I appreciate everything every one of y'all do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Because I hang out here.
Anyone else to speak concerning application number 3? Item number 4, Knowles Estate Subdivision, 3232 Center Road, recommended for tentative approval. Is the applicant present? Mr. Byrd? Are you in agreement with staff's recommendations? Yes. Applicant is? Okay. Applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. Item number 5, Johnson Subdivision, 1952 and 58, Riders Lane. Recommended for tentative approval. Is the applicant present? Are you in agreement with staff recommendations? Yes, sir. Applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Are you here to speak against, or are you just getting comfortable? Okay. All right. Item number 6. RNG Place Subdivision, 4040 Audubon Drive East, recommended for tentative approval. Applicant,
Jerry Byrd, Bird Surveying, 2609 Niles Mill Road, Mobile. We don't have a problem. I was ready to waive him. I have 4 neighbors. I've talked to them before the meeting. I think they're okay with what we're doing. I wanted to state for the record what I've told them. We've got the 6-lot subdivision. The owners of the subdivision is planning on building on lot 1. They wanted to really subdivide off lots 3, 4, 5, and 6 and put them on the market for sale. That is what they're doing. I told them I don't have the minimum square footage of the house, but because I wasn't told if they're even planning on doing that. But certainly, and one did recognize the fact that it couldn't be a mobile home because it's in the city, wouldn't be allowed. Of course, there's no access to Clemson Drive. It joins our property, but I think the city is restricting against it, and we don't want to connect to it anyway. I guess that's about all. If they want to come down. Oh, yeah, in fact, what I was just talking to them when the other one came up, wanted to know if there was anything about re-subdividing these lots. We're not, as far as I know, they're not planning on doing that. They wanted to keep the larger lots. Those are 2-acre lots, basically, 3, 4, 5, and 6. But I have told them that if someone wants to try to subdivide that, they've got to come back down here and they'll be notified all over again. That's all I
Any
have.
any questions for owner? Anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. New planning approval applications. Item number 7, 412 South Broad, Les Robinson LLC, recommend for tentative approval. Is the applicant present? Are you in agreement with staff recommendations? Applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Is there anyone here to speak against? Thank you.
I'm here with my grandson. I'm a pastor of Live Baptist Church on Broad Street. Is this the department that are talking about building a storage building across the street from the Live in that area? I'm not too familiar with it. I'm from Mount Vernon. I'm a pastor on Broad Street.
I believe so.
Church, right there.
The site is at the northwest corner of Broad and Elmira, and yes, the proposed use is a storage facility.
Yes, sir, this is the storage facility across the street from that church.
I don't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to get a little more information on it. My first time was hearing about it on yesterday. And you say it's exactly where now, on the corner of Elmira and?
It's really the south. Northwest corner of Elmira and
Okay,
big vacant lot right
okay. That's really all I needed to know. I mean, by me being the pastor, and I was just only concerned what was being, because I think at one time that was a ABC building that was going to be put there at one time in the past.
Yeah, this is storage.
And this is, okay. And I see no one else is here speaking for the community, so I guess that's all I have to say.
Pastor, did you give your name?
Beg pardon?
Did you give your name?
Pastor Lucas, C.E. Lucas. Mhm. And I pastor Live Oak Missionary Baptist Church on the corner of Selma and Broad.
Okay, sir.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
New rezoning application. Item number 8, 5569 Plantation Road, LCM Motor Cars. Recommended for tentative approval. Is the applicant present?
Jerry Bird, Bird Serving, 2609 Halls Mill Road, Mobile. They have a problem, although in condition 1, the 6-foot-high, 10-foot-wide vegetative buffer, I think may be overkill. We're putting a privacy fence down that line, which should shield the neighborhood from the boats, boat trailers, whatever, that are parked there. I don't think that the vegetative buffer will add anything to that. And I would have that requirement removed.
You want the vegetative buffer requirement removed?
Oh, leave the fence, just.
Leave the fence.
Not the hedge, not the 10-foot vegetative buffer. That's all.
Can I ask staff a question? If that's okay.
Yes.
On this recommendation about the 6-foot fence, where was the evergreen vegetation buffer to go on, obviously on the side that would hit the residential property, zone property?
Correct. This area, there's a fairly well-established neighborhood kind of sandwiched for lack of a better word, between the heavy commercial corridor along Highway 90 and then the industrial development to the east. Staff recommended both the fence and the vegetative buffer, simply trying to provide some additional buffering for those residential properties that are still maintaining.
Yeah.
Because it adjoins residential here, I guess, to the east, right?
So you're trying to just make that break, because that is now coming into the residential.
Yes, and
It's not fronting the
And-
commercial side.
And if you look behind you, the residential's just sandwiched. You have industrial to the east, commercial to the west. Ultimately, they are going to meet in the middle. However, at this time, you still have residential zoning and occupation right here.
Yeah, and all the commercial is going to access on Highway 90, correct? They don't go into that neighborhood to get to those parcels.
This property.
They'll have to go in for the first one in.
Correct. However, but as you continue eastward, all of this industrial development, including the expansion of the storage facility here, does drive straight in front of those homes to get to Highway 90.
It's the first time you're getting.
Yes,
Encroaching in.
this is the first commercial property fronting Plantation Road.
Any
Thank
other
you.
questions or comments by the commissioners? Anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. That closes the public hearing session. We'll now enter into deliberation. Going back to item number 1 for holdovers, 5500 Plantation Road, PUD was recommended for approval. Is there a motion?
Move to approve based on staff recommendations, findings of facts C and D.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Item number 2, 94 East Drive, Dawson Apartments. PUD recommended for approval. Is there a motion?
So moved, adopting findings of facts A and B.
Second?
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Yes. I couldn't pass it up. If you look at the site map, the locator zoning map, notice that this R3, which is supposed to have a plan unit development with it, there has been no zoning changes since 1981 in that area. It is all single-family. This abuts a row of single-family homes, and it abuts then a large Jehovah's Witness church, a mosque across the street, and a single-family residential property, all zoning in the R1. The change of character, which you've heard over and over again, has increased traffic. If this was a PUD on this one, how many acres is this property? 1.03. Yeah, it's very small. I think the original planning commission that sat here and offered this R3 to the applicant at the time, if you look at Wyndham Place right here, this Wyndham Court, the Wyndham Court it's called Yorktown. Those are all single family they all have backyards. It considered the R3. There is a large apartment complex that comes off of East Drive, and that has been there since the mid-'80s. Those are 2 stories, and they're like 4 apartments, a large complex obviously goes back to Long Street. And then there is another one that came in, but that can only go off of Long Street. This planning, a more recent planning commission said, enough with East Drive, we'll let you have the R3, but you can only come in on Long Street. The stress has been there a long time. If there could be some assistance to residents in this area that have not seen a zoning change, prefer to stay in the R1, which is a lot above this. It's not on the zoning map. You have Ridgefield Place, you have East Ridge Place, those are R1s. And then you have what begins the subdivision of the two gentlemen who spoke and gave you their pleas about the change of character in the area. I know we're told that this is to go up to the council, and it's been well discussed, not as a council issue, but as a planning issue. This is a planning issue. How do we look at all neighborhoods to make sure what the things that go on around them do not have the negative effects? We owe that, and a statement from this planning commission would go a long way. And plus, like I said, I would prefer and take the mindset of 1981, where they said different buildings, so that it was more in keeping of owner-occupied. Like I said, we don't get into that, but that it was not a 3-story building, and they're getting just every bit of what they can get with their parking. They'll have to get rid of some park, obviously, but again, we're not creating stability. We're not helping the area. There's plenty of student housing in the area, and there's really, it could be done so much better, and we owe that back to this community. I'm serious about this. It's our jobs.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Just a couple things. Okay, so the first guy that spoke, the screaming man from earlier, he had mentioned a couple things, and the councilor's right. We've talked about blocking this street off for a few years now. I mean, it's been a back and forth. Ultimately, it is a council decision. I mean, there's like Margaret said, there's a process and everything else. But, you know, one of the things he says is that we need to take a holistic approach and, for once, think of the neighborhoods. So I just want to know from the staff, did we look at all into what impact this might have on traffic?
With the number of bedrooms and the number of units, it's relatively low. And the way I approach these things, and it's on an individual basis because that's how I see it, what can be done by this group to mitigate their impact? And the low volume that they are anticipated to generate for this one development is, there's nothing they can do to mitigate it.
Right. Okay, so with that in mind, the other thing is that the councilor mentioned earlier the tipping point. You know, what is the tipping point? I think that that's a totally fair question. It's something that we should probably think about more often in general. So later administratively, I think we should talk about how we can approach, you know, maybe this should be right in, right out, or something. You know, we need to look at all of our options.
That's not with neighbors.
I know. I know.
Well, that's going to put them through Ridgefield, and that's what they don't want.
I know that's not what. But you know what I'm talking about. We need to explore different technical aspects instead of trying to go through the political, probably politically infeasible street vacation that the councilor mentioned earlier. With that in mind, I think of any compelling reason why we wouldn't approve this, because it's not really that many. It's not really that many people that are being added by this development. And the other question was, someone said earlier that the PUD was put in 1981 for the purpose of keeping the character of the neighborhood. Was that what the purpose of it was?
There's no documents. The staff didn't look at the minutes for those meetings. All we looked at was the ordinance that rezoned this property that specifically stated subject to an approved planned unit development. it was a specific condition.
I have a question for you. So if the applicant would have shown a 10 by 10 storage building or a little gazebo on this property, somewhere, it will have fully met the description of a PUD. There'd be a separate structure on the building.
We typically do not require PUDs, and a second building is an accessory building,
Okay.
unoccupied building such as small storage or gazebo. Initially, however, they had proposed a second building as part of this application.
Gotcha.
They since withdrew that and altered the number of units as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, one more thing. I think that in the future, if we have more people coming to look at East Drive or really, things in this area in general, we probably need to tell those developers that they're going to be mindful of the fact that there's an increasingly difficult hill they're going to have to cross to meet the needs of not just the planning commission, but also the city council. I mean, we're liable to want to rezone things or do other things like that. So we probably need to start bringing that up to people, because we can't expect that we can continue to approve and approve and approve forever.
Any other questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Ayes have it. Item passes. New subdivision applications, item number 3, Middle Earth subdivision, 5504 Timberland Ridge Road, recommended for approval. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Item number 4, 3232 Center Road, Rose Estate subdivision, recommended for approval. Is there a motion?
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Item number 5, Johnson Corner subdivision, 1952 and 58 Riders Lane, recommended for approval. Is there a motion?
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion?
I did.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Item number 6, 4040 Audubon Drive East, RNG Place subdivision, recommended for approval. Is there a motion? Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. New planning approval applications, item number 7, 412 South Broad, Lee Robinson LLC, recommended for approval. Is there a motion?
Second.
Findings of
That's
facts.
fire and facts.
A and C would be too appropriate.
Yeah, so moved with findings of fact A and B.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposes? Item passes. New rezoning application, item number 8, 5569 Plantation Road, LCM Motor Cars LLC. It's recommended for approval. Is there a motion?
To move to approve based on staff recommendations, but I have a question for clarification from the staff first. The item 1 under provisions of a 6-foot high, 10-foot wide fence. Is that 10-foot wide referring to the evergreen vegetative buffer or the privacy fence?
Buffer.
Okay, so we have a 10-foot wide vegetative buffer, I guess, at the beginning of the fence area, or to the east.
The eastern 10 feet of that lot would be the vegetative buffer.
Okay, so it's only 10 feet. Okay, okay.
Oh, is that how it is?
I move to approve based on staff recommendations.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Item passes.
Before we leave that, it's 10 feet wide, it doesn't go back 10 feet. So,
Is that the length?
The eastern 10 feet of that block.
Along the line right there, Beth. There'll be 10
Running the property line.
running that whole property line. Okay, let's make sure I understood that. Okay, well, that, all right, that passed.
Is there any new business? Any old business? Meeting adjourned.
Where are they gonna use the new planning codes? Every time I ask, it's a work in progress.
Thanks for pressing my button.